Welcome to the show, guys. We're continuing on with the Impact series. I got a very important episode here because I got a lot of questions about Dameon Pierce and other fantasy relevant players. I've got the beat writer here, Aaron Wilson. Pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. Now, had your counterparts or your, I don't know if you want to call them rivals, AFC South guys like Cole Pepper, guys like George Bremer, Colts, Jacksonville, all the other guys. But we want to talk about the Texans because, you know, we're going to talk about your outlook, how you think they're going to do today. A lot of question marks, in my opinion. Again, I'm just like a brown belt. You're like jiu-jitsu. You guys are like the black belts of like your team. You know the ins and outs that I would, have no clue of knowing. But to my understanding, looking at it on paper, you guys may finish fourth, but I want your feedback on that. I could be wrong in your division, that is. But I want to get your feedback and also some fantasy impact. If like the outlook of Dameon Pierce, some volume distribution with Marlon Mack. Is Davis Mills going to be the guy? So many questions. But before we do, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, how you got into it, how long you've been doing this, and you work directly with the team, of course, right?
Right, I do. Yeah, I do cover the Texans for a couple of outlets, Pro Football Network, which is a national NFL outlet, and also for Sports Talk 790, iHeart Radio here in Houston, home of the Astros and the Rockets. And I've been covering the team. I previously was the Houston Chronicle, been here since 2015. And before that, I was covering the Baltimore Ravens for the Baltimore Sun. And prior to that, I covered the Tennessee Titans and the Jacksonville Jaguars for some local outlets. So, yeah, I'm very familiar with the AFC South division. And when I think about, the Texans and where they're at, they're kind of in a year two of the rebuild, and they're still trying to kind of figure things out. They've obtained some draft capital through the Deshaun Watson trade. Nick Caserio, the general manager, is the architect of the rebuild. And he's the primary guy that has a vision for how he wants this to work. And it's a work in progress. It's not a fully formed roster in terms of this is who they envision being on the team. They're still working on it. And like you said, there are a lot of moving parts, but there are some, if you're a Texans fan, if you're a glass half full type of person, there's some things to be, optimistic or, at least guardedly optimistic about when it comes to the personnel on offense and defense. But yeah, it's certainly a team that you can say they have some question marks or that they need more playmakers, but you could say that about a lot of franchises. They were better than Jacksonville last year. Are they still better than Jacksonville? I think it's the question most people have about them in the division, just in terms of wins, losses. But we're talking about fantasy sports, and that comes down to a lot of individual performance, production, and distribution and workload. And yeah, happy to get into all of that with any specific questions you have about the team.
Now, do you play fantasy? Are you even allowed to play fantasy, or probably not because you're so intertwined?
I no longer play fantasy football. I used to play it in Baltimore in a league with the other media, and I found it to be distracting to me to be checking my fantasy status. And I'm not the only reporter that feels that way, that it's just, we're thinking about storylines and tracking performance and doing some reporting. Sometimes, there's injuries on a Sunday, and I'm trying to keep up. And to do that and be thinking a lot about my fantasy team doesn't really work. It's kind of incongruous to me. So, yeah, no, I don't consider myself a fantasy expert. And, it's nothing like where I've done a lot of writing. I will say, and, I think about engagement, right? Clicks, you want people to read your stories. Right. If you do pick topics in terms of skill players that people might gravitate toward, it does, just as a writer that's looking for, you want to have a large audience. It does work. And that's, I sometimes in the back of my mind will think, well, you know what? I think a lot of people would be interested in this Brandin Cooks or Davis Mills piece. And I cover the whole league, so I don't only cover the Texans. But, yeah, when I'm writing about the Texans, and I do that so frequently, it is, something I think about sometimes. Like, well, who's going to be interested in this? So you can write about a lineman, and it could be a great offensive lineman like Laramie Tunsil, but is that going to resonate with the fantasy crowd? Well, probably not. So not everything can be geared toward fantasy football fans, but fantasy football fans are a big reason for the popularity of the sport. Massive. So, that's one of the reasons you might see, oh, okay, well, I see them talking a lot about targets. I see them talking about stats. You see some of the questions they're asked. Well, that's just sort of business. That's common sense. So instead of us just only focusing on, hey, are you going to beat the Jaguars, basic type things, we try to get into some depth and we try to think about, well, how will you manufacture those targets? How will you get the football to these guys? Is the protection good enough for Davis Mills to have more than 16 touchdown passes? All of those things, all those factors, and to what I'm thinking about when I'm covering a team.
So let's dive right into it. I appreciate the context there, but when I'm looking at this depth chart right off the bat, I'm going to be straight with you. I don't sugarcoat. I'm kind of like the shock jock of fantasy. I just call it how it is. I have a saying called either that player sucks or years to wow us, we're not wowed. When I look at this team, the only two people that jump out at me in their great value this year, and I want to dive right into it because there's a question that's been burning inside of me. The two people that jump out at me are Dameon Pierce and John Michie III. Because they're value, right? I can get them and they could break out because they have that value, that upside. But I just read this report recently when we were talking running backs that Marlon Mack may get the start. I don't know. I was reading something about Marlon Mack may get the start. They're excited about him. But Marlon Mack's the guy. Years to wow me, I'm not wowed. And again, you call me an a-hole, whatever, but he sucked. He did nothing with the Colts. I know he's had 1,000 yards. No, if he was, and again, maybe I sound like a jerk here, but I'm a fantasy head. This is how we think. If you were that good, you wouldn't let Jonathan Taylor take your job. I know Jonathan Taylor is great, but if you're that good, so I think in my head, and this could be a benefit to you guys at Texas, I don't want second fiddle, right? I want, like, example, Mitch Trubisky, perfect example here. He wasn't good enough to start on the Bills. And I don't care if you're better than Josh Allen, beat him. Don't tell me, Steelers, that you're going to settle for a mediocre 1B at quarterback. For me, I have high standards, right? So I'm looking at like Marlon Mack. You didn't succeed with the Colts. Now you're coming in, and again, maybe he's a nice guy, but this is we're just talking fantasy, and I'm nothing against him personally. But I want the opportunity for Dameon Pierce. Is Dameon Pierce, could he shine here, or is it going to be the Marlon Mack show from what you're hearing? Please, if you give us some feedback, because I'm rooting for Pierce here.
Right. Well, during organized team activities and mini camps, Marlon Mack was RB1, and he was getting the bulk of the carries. Now, keep in mind, they don't tackle, so the impact of a Dameon Pierce, maybe we don't see that till preseason games, training camp, when it's live hitting.
Right.
And he's not the fastest running back. He's more of a tackle breaker, a short yardage, and I think he could vulture some touchdowns if they use him in that role as a short yardage back. I could see Mack not being maybe the primary guy because he is not as big and tough, in my opinion, as Dameon Pierce. I am also excited about Dameon, and I think the true impact of someone like him is when the games count. I think he's more of a gamer. And practice, he looked good. He caught the football well. That was one of the things we wanted to know about him. How does he catch the ball? How does he, pick up the playbook as a rookie? He just got here. So he's kind of getting his feet wet. Marlon's a pro, and I don't think anyone, including if you look at his contract, how they paid him. Are they paying him like a superstar starting running back? No, he's under a very small contract. They are buying low and hoping, for stock analogy, that he's going to hit. They haven't made a huge investment in Marlon. It's just a one-year deal. And he's coming off of injuries that cost him his starting job with Indianapolis. If he doesn't tear his Achilles, maybe they don't draft Taylor and, they miss out on a great player. I think Marlon is a good running back, not great. And I don't know if how he thinks of himself, but I did an article on Marlon, and I think Marlon is primed for something of a bounce back where he, in a committee approach, will get a lot of touches. And I think he'll probably have the most carries, more than Rex Burkhead, more than Dameon Pierce. Yeah. But I do believe when they start the season, he's going to be out there probably with the first carry of the year. And we'll see how he does. I don't know if he's going to be a 100-yard rusher or if he's going to be a 60-yard rusher. We're going to see based on touches, but they want to run the football. And Mack is not a workhorse running back. He's about 200 pounds. He's a smooth athlete that has some moves, has a wiggle in the open field, and I saw all of that. I think that he's completely healthy now. Last year, he was an insurance policy. He wasn't quite there. He was there in case anything happened to Taylor. They kept him around. They couldn't work a trade that they liked. They just let him leave in free agency. They didn't care to try to retain him. But, yeah, to me to say, well, he'll be a 1,000-yard rusher, I don't even know if he will be. Do I think he's going to run for about 700 yards and 5 touchdowns this year? I think that's more accurate. That's more of like a, realistic projection for him. And what do I think of for Pierce?
Yeah.
I think he probably runs for 400 or 500 yards. He probably scores 3 or 4 times, and it's a solid rookie year. But there is no 2,000-yard rusher on this team. There won't be. There's probably not going to be a 1,200 or 1,300 guy. They're going to distribute the workload. You're going to see Rex Burkhead get some work, even though Rex is kind of solid but not spectacular. You're going to see Dare Ogunbowale. You're going to see him as a third down back.
Royce Freeman's in there too, eh? That guy.
Yeah, Royce, he's a big back. He's
Yeah.
and some of these guys were obviously, we're getting further down the depth chart. They're fighting for a roster spot. But yeah, when I look at that, these are the backs, and no one's that excited, and I don't think there's any hype coming out of Houston. I mean, we're just saying like that Marlon, he's trying to get back to where he was, which is to be a 1,000-yard rusher, and 1,000 yards nowadays. You play 17 games. That doesn't mean much, right? And it doesn't mean a lot for fantasy players, serious fantasy players like you. But that's the reality. Yeah, you want to know what's up with the backfield? It's Marlon Mack, and then it's other guys.
I'm optimistic. I'm hoping is there a chance that Dameon Pierce can run with it? Can he be a workhorse back if given, let's say
I think he has the capability. The thing about it is, how do rookies get on the field? They have to earn trust.
Yes.
Rookies have to convince coaches like Lovie Smith that that's the move. That's how we're doing it. And how's he going to do that? He's got to get in the game. He's got to kick some butt. And if he doesn't do that, then he's going to be in this complementary role that I'm currently forecasting. And so he's got to prove himself. They don't just hand out these things. He's a 4th-round pick. They liked him more than Isaiah Spiller, which was another option for them in that round. They decided to go with Pierce. Pierce is an exciting guy as far as rough and rugged running style. Got his helmet knocked off. Kept going, scored the touchdown. He's got a few things that intrinsically make you think, maybe I should believe in this guy. I think he's tough. I think he's legit. But I don't think that they're going to build the offense around him. I mean, I'm just telling you, hope is great, but what's the truth? The truth is that Marlon Mack is RB1, and that's how they ran their practices. I went to every single one of them, and I watched all the handoffs, and he had most of the handoffs. Usually what happens in the spring does mean something in the fall.
Okay, so I got to ask you this too, because this is a totally different conversation I'm having than Jim White. I had him on the Titans.
Yeah, Jim,
super nice guy.
Nice.
Again, I'm so excited about Henry. So in regards to fantasy guys, a stash with some potential upside, but Marlon to start. But how is the O-line? Like, again, I ask people this question. I say, percentage-wise, because again, I'm not as technical as you guys are. I just want to know fantasy. How much, and if at all, has the O-line improved percentage-wise? Is it a 5% better, 10%? And how is that going to impact not only, protecting Davis Mills, but also the run game and the receivers getting the ball?
I think it's about 15 to 20% better, and here's why. They had a terrible guard situation last year. If you recall, they had to play Titus Howard out of position from tackle, his natural spot, to make him play left guard. He didn't really want to play guard, but he did what he was asked to do. They had at one point Max Sharping out there. Max has graded very poorly. Former 2nd-round pick, has been disappointing. They had a backup, Justin McCray. They had Lane Taylor out there. It was a really just in and out of the lineup type things. Justin Britt, when he was healthy, he was a solid center, and he's back and he's healthy. Okay. Now that they can put Titus Howard in his natural right tackle spot, which is where I think he was good a couple years ago, and Laramie Tunsil showed up for the mandatory minicamp. He's in great shape, and he's a Pro Bowl left tackle. So you've got 2 good tackles, and you sign A.J. Cann, who's been a respectable starter for Jacksonville. You plug him in at right guard. And at left guard, you draft a player in the 1st round that's talented and big, Kenyon Green, who I think is at least as talented as Titus Howard and just as big. So now you've got 5 good linemen, and they didn't have that. They couldn't say that last year. They barely had 3. They had like 2 when Laramie Tunsil hurt his thumb and was out for the year. So now you got Tunsil, Howard, A.J. Cann, Justin Britt, and Kenyon Green. And if Kenyon Green's as good as they say he can be, and he looked pretty good to me, just in spring drills, I think they've got the makings of a good starting 5, but they can't afford to lose anybody, or you're right back to where you were with a backup out there, and their backups aren't that good. So, yeah, the line is better, and they do have a chance to protect but a lot of this is projections, right? I'm confident in the two tackles. Tunsil and Howard is pretty good. If you ever watch Titus play, there was a game against TJ Watt about, I think it was like 2 seasons ago. He body slammed TJ. Wow. TJ got some stats, but TJ knew he was in a game. Titus is a big, rough, tough tackle. If you ever watched him, check him out, some of his film, he is a tough guy. And Laramie is a smooth pass protector, good feet. Yeah.
Well, I won't take that too much more of your time. Can you just summarize again? We could deep dive into Davis Mills' expectations.
Yeah, let's talk Davis Mills.
Pardon? What's that?
Let's talk Davis.
Okay, Davis, is he the friend? I mean, again, you guys, I had the same conversation with every other beat writer I've had so far, and you're like the 18th gentleman to come on here, or female as well. I had Tori on from the Falcons as well. Different beat writers. Everybody seems to have a lot of people have a quarterback issue. You need that quarterback in today's NFL to win. I mean, Zach Wilson's a question mark. Mitch Trubisky, Drew Lock, if he gets to start, and Gino, Trey Lance, all these question marks. How good is Davis Mills? Is he going to be good enough to feed guys like Cooks and the wide receivers? And how good is John Michie? Right. Is he a solution there? Could he be a wide receiver one, or is it the Cooks? Like, how does this all play out?
The way it works is Brandin Cooks is wide receiver one. That's why he got that big contract, and he's good. He's 4-3 in the first quarter and the fourth quarter. He's open, and he catches the ball, and he puts up stats. And he and Davis have a good connection and chemistry. Davis is a guy that would have been in the first round if he had been in this year's draft, clearly. And I had a lot of general managers and executives tell me that. He's got a live arm. He's a pocket quarterback. He's pretty smart. He generally avoids interceptions. He's made a lot of growth. His December was impressive, the way he finished the season. Right. The way he played against the Chargers, the 3-touchdown game. And he's gotten to a point now where if you look at last year, other than Mac Jones, he had the best stats. He was better than Trevor Lawrence, better than Zach Wilson, and he was doing it on a bad team.
Yeah.
And he didn't have a lot of good offensive line play. He didn't have a running back, and he overcame all of that to still play pretty well. And I think you could make the argument, does he have a chance to be 23 touchdowns and 10 picks or less? If he does that, then is he a franchise quarterback? No, but is he a solid like starting quarterback that you try to grow with and see, well, where's the ceiling? I think his ceiling is Kirk Cousins. I think his basement is, where he's at now. But yeah, he's not spectacular, but he throws a good ball. He's pretty mobile. He's a big, strong guy at 6'4", 235. And if you closely look at what he did, especially if you extrapolate out his December numbers, he's someone that I would keep a close eye on. I wouldn't give up on him. And you asked about John Mechie. John Mechie was not 100% because he tore his ACL last year in the SEC Conference Championship game. He is getting close to a point where I think during training camp at some point they're going to cut it loose with him. I've watched him run. I've been watching him work on the side. And I think he's making a lot of progress. He's a really hard worker. And the way that they would set things up for him is he'll be the slot receiver, and he would catch a lot of passes. I think he's elusive. He'd make some people miss. And maybe you're talking about a guy that's like 50 catches, 800 yards. Maybe he scores 3 or 4 times as a compliment to Brandin Cooks, wide receiver one. They're not going to throw to the tight ends that much. I'm not thinking that Farrell Brown or those guys will have like big years. But yeah, watch out for Mechie. You're onto something there. And Mechie might be a player that I'll pretend to be a fantasy guy. Stash Mechie thinking about October, November, December. That's my fantasy play.
Okay, and final thing here, and I appreciate 2 quick things here. Any inside information that we might not know that you might know, anything going on in the locker room, any special handshakes, anyone taking out anyone for dinner, any connections building in the locker room that we could say, hey, that could be fantasy relevant, or that's pretty cool to know.
Well, yeah, Davis had a quarterback retreat in Atlanta at his high school, and all the guys showed up. So he had a sort of off-season bonding thing that they did this off-season where they were hanging out, and Davis made all that happen. He organized it. It shows me some leadership qualities and shows me that the guys like him. And when I talk to guys privately, they tell me, man, Davis is cool. They're like, we like Davis. And I know that's like a small intangible, but it does matter in the locker room and it matters on the field if people are cool. This is not a team where I know they didn't win a lot of games where guys are pointing their fingers. These guys are a close team. A lot of deeply religious guys on this team like Brandin Cooks and faith-based guys, and that's kind of the vibe.
No divas, right? Not as many
No,
divas.
no. The closest thing, I mean, like Laramie, I don't call him a diva, but he likes to kind of train on his own. He's got a kind of a system where he doesn't want to go to a lot of the off-season stuff. That's not that big a deal to them. It didn't make it a big deal. There are some talents on defense, like John Grenard, who until he got his foot hurt, he was on pace for a 10-sack year. He got 8 sacks. It's not like the cupboard is entirely bare. There are some young guys like Derek Stingley, who I think is a really talented corner, Christian Harris, the linebacker from Alabama, and the safety, Jalen Petrie from Baylor. But this year is about establishing young starters, getting building blocks, foundational guys. And I don't think they're going to be a playoff contender, but they might set the stage for next year when they have more draft picks. They have the draft capital from the Deshaun trade where they could become more competitive. This is a 3, 4, 5-year process because Bill O'Brien left this franchise in bad shape. And so it's up to Nick Caserio and Lovie Smith to fix this thing. So it takes time. You gotta be patient.
Hate to put you on the spot, but where do you guys see yourself finishing? Probably like you'll be fighting for third, right?
Well, it's not I have no stake in it. Just so everybody knows, I keep score. I'm not emotional. I'm not a fan. I'm a beat writer. So I just take it seriously. And, I like the team. They're nice guys. They're good to me. But, I don't have any rooting interest. If they win or lose, I'm exactly the same. My emotions. I'm not like, oh man, they lost. This is terrible. I've ruined my day. I don't feel that way. Just to let I'm just kind of this is business, and I cover the league. And I love football, but and if I know a guy and he plays well, I'm like, oh, cool, Brandon, good dude. Yeah. I like Brandon. Brandon and me are cool, and if Brandon has a nice game, I'm like, oh, that's awesome, good for Brandon. And I write a story. Yeah. If Brandon drops the ball, I have to write about that too. As far as like where I think they're going to finish, I think they win between like 6 and 7 games. They'll make some slight improvements. Their schedule's pretty tough. They have to go to Vegas. They have to, some pretty hard road games, and they'll be more competitive. I think people will see a difference in the Texans this year because their culture is good. I think the head coach commands a lot of respect. The guys like him. He's a leader, and he's wise. He's been doing this a while. He's a former NFL Coach of the Year. If a lot of things go right for them, they win almost half their games. So, no, this is not a playoff contender, in my opinion. They're a team that could be respectable. Respectable means you win, you're like a 500 type of squad, and you're in the games.
They have a Matt Ryan problem in that division. They got a Derrick Henry problem in that division.
It's going to be hard. No, that's why you face great competitors. And that's why I'm telling you, don't expect the Texans to be in the playoffs, obviously, and I'm not a homer. I'm just very honest. If you look at the team, nowhere on the team can you say they're spectacular. Are there some guys you could say, hey, man, he's not bad. He's solid. And some guys like Brandin Cooks that are really good. Yeah, Brandon's really good. I mean, Brandon is the only guy that I think that most people would draft on their fantasy team right now, right? Yeah.
He's good value, too.
Absolutely. And he's going to have high volume of targets. He will catch the ball. He will score, and Davis is comfortable with him. Davis will feed the ball to Brandin Cooks again.
Nice. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Stay on for a minute after I let you go.
Of course.
For a second here. But, no, I appreciate you coming on. How does everybody find you? Aaron Wilson, you've got a solid Instagram. A lot of beat writers aren't with the Instagram thing, and you've got a good Instagram. I live on Instagram. That's the market.
You like Instagram. Yeah, Instagram's cool, isn't it? Yeah. I'm on Instagram at Aaron Wilson 7128, and I'm on Twitter at Aaron Wilson _NFL. Very fortunate. I got the blue check on those. So
I'm following right now. I'm following Aaron Wilson right now.
All right. Thanks.
And you're more active? Obviously, most beat writers are more active on Twitter, of course.
Well, I look at Instagram a little differently, and I think about all my 3 social medias. Facebook is like friends and family, and that's sort of for like, the grandparents, things like that. And I think Instagram, it might be a mixture of me posting some football stuff and also like, me and my wife, or maybe like a nice dinner, things like that. Or, we're going on vacation tomorrow. We're going to Los Angeles. So, I'm sure there'll be some Disney pictures, things like that. And then, I do post some football content on Instagram, and including interviews. Like yesterday, I was at a football camp with some pros, and, so Keon Crossman from the Dolphins was there. And, I was at Michael Brocker's camp. over in Houston, we have a lot of football players that live here in the off season or are from here. So I see a lot of pros all the time, and we have great trainers like Footwork King or Brandon Jordan. Like last week, I was with Jerry Hughes and Malik Collins, Ned Oliver. So yeah, I see a lot of pros, and I get to interview them, and I know those guys, and a lot of that is relationships. But yeah, Twitter, I have the most followers on Twitter. And that's where I tend to put news. And my style, I just like to chime in with observations and updates or links to articles. I don't like to joke around on Twitter. And, I know some guys do that.
I feel like talk a lot of smack on there.
Yeah, I don't do it. I'm more like business. I'm like, okay, here's the article I just wrote on Tank Dell, the University of Houston wide receiver, and I retweeted the article from the other day. He's a guy that you'll probably like him when he's in the draft. He's had 90 catches last year. He's a very interesting, fast wide receiver. He says he can run a 4.3, and he's put up big numbers for the Cougs, which is a solid football program here, University of Houston. So him and Clayton Tune, their quarterback, they have a good connection. But yeah, I just write about stuff like that, and I'll put it up and kind of let the article speak for itself. But yeah, the comments, I don't go back and forth with fans. I think most of the follow me know I'm not going to do that, and I'm not controversial. I'm more just like, hey, here's what I'm hearing, and here's some information. Just be
shooter. Here's the info.
Yeah, just tell you the truth, man. I mean, the thing about Twitter is you can have a lot of styles, but I would say if they have a social media style, have a social media style that's something that's respectable, that people will gravitate toward. And if that's not interesting enough, oh, well, I don't get paid by Twitter or Instagram. I get paid by my employer. And some media, I think they lose sight of that, and they do some goofy stuff where they get in Twitter feuds and, or they're just being silly. I don't have time to waste my time on that. I'm more like, I'm going to get on the phone. I'm going to talk to my sources. I'm going to talk to people from NFL agents. I'm going to talk to players, and I feel like I got to do my job. But I'm all for, it's a free country. Do whatever you want, but I got to be true to myself. And my style for social is, just to keep a positive image. Don't get into any, controversies or, flaps like that. But yeah, I mean, everyone's different, and that's why it's great. It's a free country. Do whatever you want. Right. But my choice is I stay out of stuff, and I'm passionate about my job, but I'm not emotional about it, if that makes any sense. So, I'm not going to get into a heated debate about, oh, this guy stinks or this guy's that. I'm different. This is a business for me, and I do my job. And the thing about it is the guys that play this game, and, I don't know how many of you get to meet, they're good guys primarily. Yeah. And it's hard. How hard it is to be a football player. That's tough, man. You got to be a great athlete. You got to be a tough guy. They take brutal hits. I know guys that have permanently damaged their brains with the CTE. I covered Demaryius Thomas, who's no longer with us. Rest in peace, Demaryius. So, I just think it's a good thing to remember. Just these are men, grown men playing a kid's game, and they do try their best. Generally, I would say these guys give what they have, and then it's over. And so the Tony Siragusas, I covered Tony in Baltimore. Yeah. He's no longer with us. That's not because of CTE, but other health issues. And so, I mean, I think respect is, it's a word that's used lightly sometimes. These guys deserve respect.
Yeah, and usually I'm the one wanting to box all of them on my social media.
I would just say like this, if you think about these guys, they all have families. They're not bad guys. They're not, they want to play well. If they have a bad game, they feel terrible. It's like it doesn't mean anything to them. Yeah, it hurts. It definitely hurts.
That's the problem with the fantasy community. We kind of rub it in, and it's not so much me. It's just more like they get tweeted.
That's the style. Yeah.
You suck. So what it pisses them off? Then they come out and say, well, here's the pattern. So they have a bad game. Everybody takes to Twitter and Instagram. You guys suck. You suck for my fantasy team. You blew the load. Whatever. Then what happens is they come out and they lash out and say, I hate fantasy. And then I lash out telling them that fantasy makes them who they are. And then they want to box me and they're in my DMs, and then it gets dramatic. So that's how it kind of goes. It's like I kind kind of stand up for the fantasy community. But what's funny is that they can't hate fantasy because it's kind of proportional and in parallel with their production. So it kind of like if you perform well in fantasy, you're theoretically performing well in fantasy. But I get them being annoyed. I totally see where they're.
Well, the thing about it too is, how does your production happen? It's dependent on the play call. It's dependent on the teammates, the scheme against
variables.
you. So all these variables, yes, great word for it. They all affect performance. So you could have a low performing game and it not be your fault. Your stats could be super average, but you did your job. Like, because we don't always know their assignments. What are they asked to do on that play? Well, what if they were supposed to block and they don't get the touch, or they're just a decoy on that pattern, or the quarterback is supposed to check down and not go for the deep ball? So it's, I mean, when I think about it, football is a pretty complicated, nuanced game. And the performance, the numbers, we measure them. We all know the stats. How do those stats happen? What's behind the stats?
Right.
I think it's an important thing to think about. But yeah, fantasy is great because fantasy is a lifeblood and it's so popular and it's great for the leagues and it's great for the engagement.
It is.
So these are fun debates to have. Yeah. And
I told Cole Pepper right to his face. I'm like, I'm not watching any Jacksonville games, but I do have a stock in Christian Kirk as a sleeper this year. So I will be watching Jacksonville games because of Christian Kirk. That's it.
And again, my fantasy plays Brandin Cooks, John Mechie for later. And, when I think about, I'm kind of like passing on the running backs and the tight ends. I'm not really thinking big numbers for them. And I think Davis Mills would be a good backup quarterback for, depending on how many quarterbacks you get to draft in your league. But Davis would be someone that's maybe steady. But what am I thinking he might do? I don't even know if he's going to average 2 touchdown passes a game. That'd be great if he did. But, if he was able to do that and have like a 30 touchdown year, well, that'd be incredible. That'd be a great leap for him going from 16. But remember, he didn't play. It was him and Tyrod Taylor. And there were moments where I thought, this guy's got literally no blocking, no chance. He's got a chance this year.
Right. Well, let's hope the best for him and that offense this year. And hopefully, Dameon Pierce does break out. Now, God forbid, if Marlon does get hurt, more chance for Dameon Pierce, of course, right, to get more workload. That's the only way he gets, obviously, right?
Well, no, I think they're going to compete in training camp, and they're going to see how it goes. But heading into training camp, Marlon is RB1, and Dameon's not exactly the backup yet. Like, there's Rex Burkhead, who's, they gave a pretty good contract to. Rex is a solid pro. So, and then Dare is the third down back. So there's a kind of a pecking order, and he's going to have to unseat Marlon Mack to be the guy. And right now, he's not the guy.
All right. Well, time will tell. Hopefully it's change.
It always
appreciate you coming on, Aaron. Guys, go follow Aaron, and thank you for being on. Great insight, and we'll continue on with the Impact series. It's been a lot of fun getting into the sources' heads here. It's been exciting.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot.